Well, thank you for tuning in. Today I'm going to bring you your math lesson for this week. And as you can see, our focus is going to be on 2D and 3D shapes. Now, you've already done some work with this last week and you'll continue to do some this week. So let's take a look at some examples of 2D and 3D shapes. Up at the top, the examples of 2D shapes would be a pentagon, a square, a hexagon, a triangle, a rectangle, a trapezoid, and a circle. And the thing to keep in mind with 2D shapes is they all have sides and corners. Now at the bottom, we see some examples of 3D shapes here. Some of those examples would be a cone, a pyramid, a cylinder, a sphere, a rectangular prism, and a cube. And to keep in mind with 3D shapes, these have edges, corners, and faces. So the edges of these shapes, for example, this would be the edge right here where the two lines are meeting. Here's some more examples of edges in our rectangular prism and our cube. And then they have corners. The corners are the points at which your lines connect. And of course, they have faces. Now on 3D shapes, sometimes those faces are rectangles, such as this one here in a pyramid, or you can have all square faces, such as a cube, or you can have rectangular faces such as with a rectangular prism. But all 3D shapes are going to have edges, corners, and faces. So let's do a little comparison between taking two of our 3D shapes, a cube and a rectangular prism, and talk about how they're the same and different. And this is a Venn diagram. We've done this in the classroom. These parts, this will represent what applies just to a cube. This is what applies just to a rectangular prism. And this inside part where they overlap is what they both have in common. So let's take a closer look at a cube. So here's an example of a cube here, and here is an example of a rectangular prism. And let's think for a moment about what these shapes have in common and what is specific to each one. Now, sometimes it's easier to start with what is the same instead of what is different. So I'm going to move this down just to give us a little more space to work. So I want you to think for a second. Both a cube and a rectangular prism are 3D shapes. So in the middle here, we can put, and I've just done this on a sticky note, saying that they are both 3D shapes. Well, because they're 3D shapes, that means that they have edges. So here are the edges you can see on the cube, and here are the edges we can see on the rectangular prism. In addition to being 3D and edges, they also have faces. So this one, all of its faces are square, and here it's rectangular. May not be the same, but they still have faces. And then the other thing they have in common is that they have corners. Where all of the lines meet, you have corners there. So, the things that a cube and a rectangular prism share are they're 3D, they have edges, they have faces, and they have corners. Now let's think about what does a cube has but a rectangular prism does not. Well, a cube, all of its faces are square faces. Oh, that fell down. Let's try again. So all of a cube has square faces. Every single side is made up of squares. Now let's think for a second about a rectangular prism. Well, a rectangular prism, part of the reason it's called that is because of rectangle. It has rectangular faces. So we're going to put rectangular faces here. So we see that a cube, what's different than the rectangular prism, the cube is made up of square faces. The rectangular prism is made up of rectangular faces. Now, what I encourage you to do, and as you do your assignments this week, you're going to be doing some comparisons between 2D and 3D shapes. So I encourage you, take two shapes. It can be whatever you want, maybe a triangle and a triangular prism or a square and a cube, and compare them and see what's the same and what's different about them. Now, you can do comparisons not just in math, but also with literacy. And later this week, I'm going to be sharing with you a literacy lesson that's going to be comparing two things much similar to this. We'll be doing a Venn to talk about what's the same and different. So I hope you'll use this in your lessons this week. Again, you'll be talking about 2D and 3D shapes. Now, as we finish our lesson today, a song that we've listened to in class is a song called 3D Shapes That I Know. And I'm going to pull this song up for you. Now, we may not have a chance to listen to it before our time runs out, but I encourage you to check out this song on YouTube. You would just go to the site and type in 3D Shapes That I Know. So let's take a listen to this song now.
I'm a 3D shape expert. Here are the 3D shapes that I know. A sphere, a cylinder, a cube, and a cone. A baseball, the moon, and an orange I have right here are all examples of a 3D shape that people call a sphere. A basketball, the earth, and marbles I have here are all examples of a 3D shape that people call a sphere. Here are the 3D shapes that I know. A sphere, a cylinder, a cube, and a cone. A soda can, a pencil shacked, and a can of soup would be examples of a cylinder, as you can plainly see. A marker, a glass of milk, and a peanut butter jar are all examples of a cylinder. Yes, I'm sure they are. Here are the 3D shapes that I know. A sphere, a cylinder, a cube, and a cone. An ice cube, a cardboard box, and a Christmas present for you are all examples of a 3D shape